This is Bill Hartzer, and this is the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast for July 7th, Thursday, July 7th, 2022. Lots of things to go on this week. I just finished up another podcast earlier with another group, and it went fairly long today, so I have a lot of things to talk about. So let's get started. As I've mentioned, it seems like every week I actually mention that there's a Google search ranking update, and this week is not unique. There has been a Google search ranking update July 5th and 7th, and so that actually is telling us that that there are regular updates, and that is to be expected. As I mentioned, previously in other podcast, other situations, that frankly, Google made over 5,000 changes to their algorithms last year. And so if you just look at it this way, that, every week there is a new update, or they're constantly updating, frankly, that's a good thing. And so you can't really get obsessed with, kind of chasing the algorithm update, because years ago, and this was, let's talk about maybe 15 years ago, there were regular updates, but it was like 3 or 4 times a year or twice a year. And so in that case, they weren't as complex. And so you could kind of figure out what the issue was. And the other thing is, though, it was difficult or frustrating, because if there was a change to Google's algorithm and it negatively affected your particular site or site you are working on, you could make all these changes, but frankly, you wouldn't get rankings again, or the traffic wouldn't come back again until Google made an algorithm update. This is different now, because frankly, there are so many updates. You could, in theory, make a change and make changes to your site, and you could see, benefits from those changes fairly quickly. That's a good thing, and maybe, a bad thing. So you can't really analyze as well as we used to be able to analyze the search results. But again, it's a good thing that Google's doing updates and so forth. And again, July 5th and 7th were the target dates for those last updates. Now, I asked a question, let's move on. I asked a question on Twitter about internal search pages. I said, literally, I didn't address anyone in particular. I just wanted to put the question out there. In the past, I have specifically asked questions and maybe tagged John Mueller from Google or somebody else, hoping that they would answer. In this case, I just wanted to see what would happen and ask the question. Now, the question was literally, should you purposely allow indexing of your internal search pages? This is a question that, is debatable, really. And kind of it's, the answer is, well, it depends. However, my opinion is, in the majority of cases, they should not be indexed now or allowed to, or if you are a situation where you are purposely trying to get those pages indexed as content on your site, that could be seen, in my opinion, violates Google's guidelines. And especially if the pages are equivalent to low effort or low quality pages. Now, let's see exactly what John Mueller's answer was. He said, and I quote, "I can see a selected list of search queries being essentially equivalent to a low effort category pages, but overall I block them. It's not just index pages. Every week I get emails from sites, big and small, who got spammed with queries and struggle to fix it. Now, those are two kind of issues. Number one, it comes down to, is the content low effort, meaning that it kind of auto-generated, and they're essentially equivalent to, category pages and pages that are just auto-generated. Those pages, would violate Google's webmaster guidelines. So they shouldn't be in there. And it's my opinion that, and I know very specific examples that where sites have been large sites, right? Like CNET and some of the others that, very large, very large or well-known sites that have been given penalties for allowing their search pages to index. I wrote a blog. I found that Bing's search engine pages were actually getting indexed in Google at one point. This was probably like mid 2010s, like 2013, 2014. I wrote about it, and within a day or two, Google found out about it and they removed those pages. I don't believe Bing got dinged or penalized, but regardless, those pages were removed. Now, my opinion is, there's two issues that John Mueller brings up. Are you purposely creating those pages in a result in an effort to get them indexed to make your site larger, right? Are you adding, tens of thousands or 100,000 pages of search results, for keywords that literally you're doing it to get more traffic? If that's the case, and you're creating XML sitemaps and so forth, then yeah, you probably, are violating Google's webmaster guidelines, and, you should probably get penalized. And it's just a matter of fact of them finding out about it at some point. Either them, de-indexing those pages, not crawling them anymore, or in worst case, giving you a penalty. Now, the other aspect is, John Mueller mentioned it's not just index pages. If you are allowing those pages internal search page results to get indexed somehow, somehow being done, well, what can happen is there can be bots, if you will. People create bots that will fill out and constantly do searches and literally create those pages, potentially millions of pages. And that can be an issue, right? And that's, you're essentially spammed with search queries, and it's difficult to fix that. That's a separate issue. But so several years ago, and within past 5 years or so, I'd have to look up specifically. I think I even wrote about it. I actually did take a list from SEMrush. I did a search for SEO and took all that list of, say, 10,000 keywords related to SEO and created those internal search URLs. And basically what I did is create XML sitemaps of those URLs. It was like, this query was SEO rankings, right? SEO space rankings. Well, it was pretty easy to just change the URL and make it SEO plus rankings and make it a fully fledged URL that actually had a search result when you went to that page. After testing that, those got indexed because they were in my XML sitemap. They did not have internal links on the site to those pages. So there wasn't really any SEO value being passed. That's another factor. There you could basically not only just essentially create an XML sitemap of those pages, let's say 100,000 pages. You could, in theory, take take in the footer, make a script that would basically take a text file of all those 100,000 URLs and take the first 10 of them and put links, make links, and put that in the footer. And that every time the page loaded, you would have more links to the next 10, the next 10, the next 10, next 10. And those essentially would be links. You could create HTML sitemap pages that might pass some link juice or a link credit or page rank over to those internal search pages. There's different options, but essentially what I found personally, those got indexed. I did not see any benefit or traffic. May have seen some traffic potentially. I didn't see any benefit. So frankly, I removed them. I no indexed them. I removed the XML sitemap. I made sure that basically that Google couldn't crawl them anymore. And then after a few months, there were some still in the index. They were still lingering, even though I told them not to index those pages anymore. And so I used the Google removal tool to remove them. Now, moving on. Don't mark up third-party reviews with structured data. Plain and simple. If you are taking, here's the example. If you are taking specifically reviews from, maybe you're scraping them from Google, taking them from an API somewhere where they're your review, they are reviews for your site, your products, your, but those reviews were left on other third-party sites, right? So let's say it's a local business, you take your reviews, you copy them somehow, you put them from the Google reviews and you put them on your site. Google says, okay, no problem, you can use them, but do not take those reviews from Google or the other site and mark them up with schema markup code or structure, essentially structured data, and then mark them up as a review and put them on your site. That's where Google draws the line. And whereas, those third-party reviews, now it's okay, and it's okay to have a form on your site and have somebody submit a review that is unique to your site, even though maybe somebody took that review, and they copied it, and maybe they left that same review on, on several different review sites. I personally done that when I have made reviews. I made a review for a business. Rather than typing out the long review again, I copied it, I put it on Google, I put it on, Better Business Bureau, I put it on Yelp, I put it on, all these different sites. That was up to me. Now, if they do leave the review for you on your site and somebody fills out the form, this is the way it should work. They should fill out the form. It should go to you. You should moderate it, accept it, and then put it as content on your site as a review. That you can mark up as with structured data, as schema markup code, and the review markup code. That's appropriate. Now, that's Google has been very, in the past few days, Google has been very adamant about making sure everybody understands that, because I have a feeling that if you are copying reviews from other sites and putting them on your site and marking them up, frankly, what's going to happen is you're probably going to get a penalty, either algorithmic or some other kind of penalty. That's something that you don't want to mess with. Now, content ideas for blog posts. I have a client that has asked me every month. They have a writer who writes an article, a blog post, and so forth. They asked me as the SEO on the site to come up with content ideas, right? You should write about this, you should write about that. Now, that is because this long-term client of mine previously had a writer, and the writer came up with content ideas. Now, the content ideas were okay that this other previous writer came up with, but they had nothing to do with the site. They were on the general topic. Let's say this is a home inspector, and they're doing home inspections. Well, some of the content was about let's say, how to prepare your house for winter so your pipes don't freeze. It's about your home, sure, and your house, but it honestly is not really the content that this site needs, because we need site content that's about, that home inspection, right? Not necessarily just any whatever topic about a house. It's not a DIY site. Okay, so here's what I come from, and here's how I deal with this. So, a couple situations. So I look at the current rankings. I know we shouldn't be looking at rankings every day and so forth, but I look where, what pages are ranking, right? I look for rankings of pages that are not on the first page of Google search results, but have a good number of monthly searches. There's maybe a page that is a blog post from a couple years ago that where it is acceptable, perfectly acceptable, 3-4 years ago to write a blog post is 500 words. Well, now in certain industries, real estate and other particular industries, content now really needs to be based on the competition and rankings. We're talking about minimum 500 words before, but now we're talking about minimum of like 1,500, 2,000, 3,000, 3,500 words or more, depending on the topic, right, of the article. So anyway, here's the deal. The deal is that look at current rankings, see if there's something of a current page that was maybe 500 words, 1,000, whatever, that now could be refreshed, because you're already ranking. You don't want to change the URL. Don't change the URL of that blog post. However, just go back, have the writer add to it, do some further research, write a little bit more, expand on certain points, have the writer, basically make that blog post longer based on what you're seeing, the top 3 to 5 rankings. If their articles are 1,500, 2,000 words, and you need to be at 1,500, 2,000 words or longer to be able to compete. Also look for articles, like I said, those that can be improved. It's a lot of cases, it's content length that it needs. It needs headings, it needs sections, and it needs, and so forth. Keep the same URLs of the writer, rewrite the post, add more content. Now, go to SEMrush, look for long tail keywords with traffic. So now what's happening is people are, not just searching for 1 or 2 words, they're using like 5, 6, 7 words. And those 7-word long tail keywords are actually having a significant amount of traffic now. So for example, like questions, you can, and what I would do is, if you see that question, and it could be a blog post, make sure the search query is the title tag, is the title of the post exactly, right? It could be things that go wrong. Well, maybe that's the search query. Things that can go wrong when you're buying a house. Well, okay, it could be 11 things that go wrong when buying a house. Still, you've got things that go wrong when buying a house. That's the important part. Also, worth mentioning, go through another thing you can do. Go through and review all your blog posts. Sure, look at the best ones, but somehow narrow them down. Obviously, if you have 500, it's not, somehow you need to narrow it down. But make sure those blog posts that are the best ones have a main image that is at least 1,200 pixels wide. Review the guidelines for Google Discover, those Google Discover requirements, because those are very key. Those are key because that can bring a lot of really good targeted traffic to your site. You want to be in Google Discover, but you will not be in Google Discover unless you meet all those requirements. For example, you have to have at least one image that's 1,200 pixels wide. If it's 1199 pixels, it will not be in Google Discover. It has to be 1200 wide or more. Now, additional content for your site, if you're a local business, consider adding city pages, but they need to have content. So you can't just create a page, change out the city name, and so forth. That's a doorway page that's against Google's guidelines. You actually have to write unique content for each city. Those can be, lucrative if you keep it to a minimum and don't do thousands. Obviously, you would want to keep it, if it's a local business, 10 to 12 at the most, which all those cities may be bordering your area. If you're a service area business, look at your area. Are you really going to dispatch somebody out, that's 100 miles away? You may or may not, depending on the business. So pick your cities. You may not want to do them all at once. Maybe do a few and see how it works. Then later on, do a few more. I'm doing that for a local business, and it's working very well. Consider adding FAQs. Add an FAQ section if you don't have them. If you have FAQs at the bottom of your page, I have a technical SEO audit client where I found that the FAQs were actually embedded at the bottom of most pages of the content, and they didn't take those FAQs and make a separate FAQ section on the site. That's what I would recommend, creating a separate page. So a little bit about domain updates, but domain names, working on a case. I've been working on a case for over a year now, and somebody hacked into the Gmail account. They took that access and they accessed into the domain registry account. They got into the registrar's account, and the registrar's account, and then they, rather than transfer the name to themselves, they went ahead and they actually deleted the name. And so they thought that, I believe what they thought, that they could delete the name and then they could then buy the name. Which happened is it deleted. This person had renewed the name till 2025. And then they had gone in, so the hacker went in and deleted the name, which is suspect anyway. Okay, that shouldn't generally happen on this. A good name was a premium name. So anyway, so new owner, someone else bought the name. We don't know who it was, whether it was the hacker or not. But anyway, somebody went in and bought the name, and now and we have basically been negotiating, and we came up with a price, and the original owner will buy the name back for the amount that the person paid for that name, because apparently they legitimately bought the name that had been deleted. And so then we will go after the registrar, and there are actually the two registrars that are involved in this particular case, to get the original registrant repaid for those fees. Now, that's not a situation. Hopefully that will resolve in the next day or two. Like I said, it's good to see a situation that I've been working on a stolen domain, a hacked domain case for over a year and a half, and then it's finally coming down. Now, other situations, I have so many other domain stories I could tell you. We'll probably leave those for next podcasts or next version of the podcast. Now, I've been testing out several different options for dealing with spam emails, frankly, and it comes down to that, there's different services out there, and there are certain ones that have failed me and are just not good. There's some that essentially are filters, and they're supposed to essentially filter out your mail, but frankly, they didn't work, and this one option took me longer, to basically create more filters and to train their system, which really they should have been just identifying emails and so forth and taking care of them. Anyway, so I don't use any Gmail products. I understand that Gmail and Google is very good about filtering because and so forth. But because of my relation, my particular business, I have my own domain names, and even though I could set them up as workspace accounts and use their email, I do not need or cannot afford to have my certain emails go through Google's systems. So legally, it just is one thing that I can't have happen because frankly, some of the legal cases and emails that are involving involve Google in some way. And so I can't have an email related to Google that goes through Google's system, right? So I use my own separate mail server and my own, or essentially my own email. So I've been testing out Spam Hero, and frankly, it seemed to be catching a lot of good spam and making it so that I don't have to spend a lot of time just deleting emails, right? So that is actually working out so far. And essentially the concept is that emails filtered, and then once a day I have a list given to me that I can just go through and see if it missed, if anything went into the spam, then I need to address. Now, what's interesting is that there are certain spam by spammers, email spam that's sent directly to mail servers or directly to the server, bypassing every single email filter that is set up. So there are certain settings on your server that that you can do that basically helps secure your server so that some of the spam, when a spammer sends email directly to your server, which they know bypasses all email filters, then you can secure your server so that it doesn't happen. So anyway, so that's if you're interested in knowing how to take care of that, get in touch with me and I can show you exactly how to take care of that, especially if you're using cPanel, which is helpful. So that said, this has been the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast for Thursday, July 7th, 2022. Thanks for joining me this week, and we'll talk to you again next week. And I'm sure I'll have another exciting episode with a lot of great details. Thanks again.